Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
I saw something on Instagram that I wanted to read today. It says, marriage is the lowest paid form of sex work. Women are owed reparations. The people we lay with are the people who are most likely to kill us, which sounds really dark, but that's the reality we're living in. The reality is women have lost their lives in pursuit of men.
What in the name of all that's holy is going on this week? Because there must be something in the water, something stupid. And no, your ears were not deceiving you. You heard this dried-up former video vixen right. She claims that women in general are owed reparations for marriage. Now, you'll notice that she mixed two separate groups together. She said marriage is the lowest paid form of sex work. Then she said women are owed reparations. Now, if she says marriage is sex work, then that means married women are the ones that she's talking about. Then why in the very next sentence does she say women in general? Why does she mix the two? Women who are married, they're owed something, but women in general are? She should have just said married women are owed reparations, but she didn't because in her twisted mind, she's talking about herself. Because she's not married, and she's never been married. In fact, that's something that she bragged about during the video. That she had never been married, and that's okay.
I know that I'm not the only one that felt that their life choices were put under attack. So this episode is called, I am 48, I am child-free, and I've never been married. And guess what? That's okay.
Then why is she saying that marriage entitles women to reparations when she herself has never been married? This is the thinking of these thoughts. This is the way their minds work. It doesn't have to be logical. It doesn't have to make sense because these women have been trading off their looks their entire lives, and they've been getting attention that they haven't earned. They've been getting money that they don't really deserve, and that's irrational in and of itself. But hey, when you've been able to have the world topsy-turvy like that, you kind of get to the point where you feel you can spout any old gibberish and people will take it seriously. We'll talk about that later on in this morning's briefing. Now, the reason that we're even talking about this waste of air is because of the fact that this is once again yet another example of somebody claiming they want reparations for something, even though these are people who have nothing to do with the slavery holocaust that happened in this country. They're throwing that term around when they've never said it before. This stuff is not just popping up out of the ground. It's coming from somewhere. This is part of how established power tries to dilute a political threat to them by throwing up as much white noise as they can. If black people are demanding reparations, then get some of your flunkies out there to claim that everyone should get reparations for something or other. Because as we all know, if something is for everyone, then that means it doesn't truly apply to anyone at all. It cancels itself out. We've seen illegal aliens claiming they want reparations for what, I don't know. LGBT people saying that they want reparations because people didn't accept their lifestyle all the time. And now we got dried out thoughts from the early aughts who are saying they want reparations because of marriages even though they've never been married. Any alleged harm that women like Melyssa Ford experienced was her own fault and no one else's. She volunteered for the life that she led. She could have stayed in her lane and pursued a decent man, but she wanted to live the fast life. Well, the problem with the fast life is it also comes to an end fast too. So here she is, middle-aged, unmarried, childless, alone, and trying to convince herself that she's happy and it's not all her fault anyway. On a side note, this woman's Canadian. She was born in Toronto. Her father is West Indian, her mother is Caucasian. Gee, she has something in common with Kamala Harris after all. So what that tells us is she has no connection to us whatsoever, and I have to point that out because keep in mind, after the end of chattel slavery, there were a number of black people who didn't just go to the north, they kept going till they saw a sign that said, "Welcome to Canada." So there are Afro-Canadians who, at least in terms of ancestry, they could actually trace their roots back to the killing fields of the American South, but Melyssa Ford isn't one of them. Her ancestry, at least on the black side, is traced back to the Caribbean. So what we have here is yet another tether, because this is a woman here, she's known for the United States rappers that she's been involved with, and that being the case, you can bet she'll try to play on that and lean on that as giving her legitimacy for all of this off-code, off-the-wall stuff that she likes to say. White supremacy is very sophisticated, and they would love to try to confuse the issue and muddy the waters any way they can. This is the kind of person that they would like to put in front of a camera precisely because her past is so jumbled. And she will be sitting there talking about reparations for everything except for slavery. That's what I'm trying to say. This is something to keep an eye on. But as far as the rest of what this woman has said, it's about what you would have expected. She's unloading all of the trauma that she's inflicted on herself. She griped about men a lot, and her parents, by the way, mostly her father, and basically saying she was a victim of every man that she ever met. Now, this is a woman who the only reason anyone knows who she is, and I mean the only reason, is because you had some rappers and a few prurient magazines, booty magazines actually, who thought that this woman was cute 25 years ago. That's the only reason anybody knows who she is. I was half expecting her to Me Too one of those rappers, by the way, at this point, because given the rumors about Joy Taylor, that just might be in the cards too. But for all of you folks out there, especially you young black women out there who idolize these thoughts and may have spent so long wishing that you could be one of them, and you wonder why it is that old stick-in-the-muds like me don't just get with the times, this is the reason why. This kind of person, she's got a ton of issues. Hell, at this point, she's got subscriptions. But this kind of person is very dangerous if we allow ourselves to decide that she should be amongst us. This is not somebody you want to be keeping company with. And speaking of not keeping company with her, she ain't wife material. This is not the kind of woman who gets a happily ever after. That's why she's not a wife. She's not girlfriend material either. And given how she only talks about herself all the time, I'm not even sure that she's friend material. She claims that she doesn't want to be married. No, the problem is that none of those rich men that she was cavorting with back in the day were willing to subject themselves to a lifetime with her. She was very high profile in the hip-hop industry at the turn of the 21st century. Very few of the quote-unquote video vixens had more face time than Melyssa Ford. But when being sexy is your portfolio, you place all your chips on a depreciating asset. And she is a walking cautionary tale for why you don't want to sit there and decide that your body is going to be your portfolio. No woman is as hot at 48 as she was at 28. That's why you have to be a woman of substance. Beauty fades. A woman's fertility eventually ends. But if she's a person of character, that lasts her entire lifetime. If you've been running the streets, parachuting from bed to bed, practicing how to be a sexual partner, but not practicing how to be a life partner, then you'll ultimately wind up like her. And at that point, you're just trying to hustle. But that's not the reason she's the subject of this morning's briefing. It's because this Canadian tramp decided that she's going to be talking about reparations as something other than applied to American slavery. I don't think that it was a coincidence at all that she decided she was going to casually throw around the term reparations, when this is a word that I don't think she's ever used in her entire life. And that is something that cannot be allowed. We have to push back when stuff like this happens. This is why it's dangerous to allow people to speak on these issues when they don't have our interest at heart. This dried out, used up ex-party girl who aged out of the game at least a decade ago. The phone ain't ringing. All she can do is reminisce about the good old days 25 years ago. So she's doing like a lot of these video vixens and other women who work in the white media have to do once their age begins showing and they get shown the door. They start looking around saying that there's a man who owes them some money. But on a side note, why is it that this woman who has never been married is sitting here talking down on the institution of marriage? She claims that marriage is a form of prostitution. I have to wonder, though, who does she think she's going to be getting reparations from? Will she be getting it from the husband that she's never had? Does she think that she's owed reparations by the state? Was she married to the state? What woman has ever been married to the state? This gives us a real window into the thought processes of these women who we saw in these rap videos 25 years ago. And when you hear gibberish like this, you understand exactly why it was that they were sitting there shaking their goodies in front of a camera, because this is their mentality. This is what passes for them making a cogent argument for something. Marriage rates in the U.S. are approaching all-time lows, and when you have individuals like Melyssa Ford calling themselves giving relationship advice, you see exactly why that is. This is what happens when you let the mentally deranged have a microphone and an internet connection. Claiming that marriage is prostitution, that's what I expect from someone who's made her living and reputation off of having sex or trying to tempt men strictly by appealing to them on a sexual level. When the only thing a woman knows how to do is to make money off of her body, either in front of a camera or behind it, she looks at every interaction as being prostitution. Doesn't matter if it's marriage, a trip to the grocery store, a job, or whatever. Anything that involves interacting with other people will inevitably be twisted in their minds into something sexual, because that's how women like this navigate their way through the world. with their legs wide open. As the old saying goes, when the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to look at every problem as being a nail. Well, when the only tool you have is sex appeal, you will look at every interaction and situation as a sexual proposition. This is whorehouse culture. This is a whorehouse mentality. This is why I rarely watch what the white media puts out there as entertainment. This is the reason why I, and probably you too, stopped listening to music on the radio decades ago. We certainly stopped watching music videos decades ago, and this is why I am proudly out of touch with so-called pop culture. Because it's become a toilet, and this woman is the kind of crap you find floating in it.
The traditional idea of love is damaging for women because it involves us being self-sacrificial in order to prove our worth. Men need to learn to find sustenance, entertainment, and sexual gratification outside of women because we don't owe men that.
She had complained about her own parents' dysfunctional relationship, and then she goes on to praise the idea that traditional ideas of love are damaging to women because it requires them to be self-sacrificial. Notice she doesn't say anything about how traditional ideas of love require a man to sacrifice himself for his wife and children, not just in terms of taking care of them financially, but also giving his life if his family is threatened. This is what goes along with being in a committed relationship. You are prepared to sacrifice for it. And as I've explained previously, the word sacrifice means to make holy. So when she disparages the idea of being self-sacrificial, what she's saying is nothing in a relationship should be made holy. Nothing about the relationship should be considered holy. Well, that's not the way the relationships work, not the ones that are actually meaningful and consequential. Because you see, you don't just sacrifice yourself for any old person. You only do it for someone who means something to you. And when somebody says, well, you shouldn't be self-sacrificial, what they're really saying is there shouldn't be any relationship that's so important to you that it's holy. But this is what you get from her. She takes this feminist lexicon, all of these cute little terms that they've come up with, like decentering and other things. She throws all of this verbiage into a blender and then vomits out this garbage. And again, this from a woman who isn't married and who has been dysfunctional in relationships her entire adult life. And when she complains about the notion that traditional ideas of love require women to be self-sacrificial, so that's wrong, do you think she doesn't bring that same objection to the idea of children too? Do you think that she doesn't see raising children as a thankless task where a mother is required to sacrifice herself for her children? Being a spouse requires less self-sacrifice than being a parent. When you're a parent, you are completely and thoroughly immolating yourself. You are literally pouring yourself out for the sake of this child or children. And that being the case, do you think that she looks at parents who are raising their children and she says to herself, oh yeah, you should be sacrificing yourself for them. Why? Well, because you love them. This is dysfunctional. When someone practices being selfish, it doesn't just stop at one or two people. They do it with everyone. Does this sound like a healthy sense of self-love coming from this woman, or does it sound like someone trying to justify their own narcissism? This woman thinks the universe revolves around her, even though people stopped knowing who she was at least 10 years ago. All that being a sexual symbol, trading on her looks and sexuality, and what she got to show for it. A bunch of hard luck stories, trauma, and the old new wave feminist line about she's older and wiser now. Well, judging by the way she's talking, only the older part is true. She claimed that before she became a sex pot, she had a reputation for being the brainy girl in the group. Really? You know, that's a line that pinup girls have used, well, since the beginning of photography. As soon as you had some woman who clearly is in front of a camera trying to get attention through titillating people, whenever they ask her about herself, she always tries to claim that she's so educated, she's brainy, this, that, and a third. They all do it, and we still see it today. Well, I'd like to know, when has Mrs. Ford been using her brain? She's no different than Corinne Steffens, aka Superhead. See, they're used to getting away with standing in front of a camera while some person with a microphone asks them questions and they can answer any ridiculous gibberish they want, and the person with the microphone doesn't question it or cast any doubt on it. They're used to getting that kind of treatment. And when you get away with that for years, especially when you're young, you start to think of yourself as some kind of boy genius. But the reality is, the reason that nobody tries to question their huge intellect is because they're usually too distracted looking at their plunging cleavage to care about what they have to say. But these video vixens are always the last to figure that one out. That's why so many of them wind up unmarried, and the few who do get married inevitably divorce. They're walking disaster zones. And I, for one, found it hilarious when she said that men assign value to women based on attractiveness. Well, women like Melyssa Ford assign value to men based on their income. She would have no problem finding a man who valued her based on her personal traits. But this is a woman who made her living for several years literally showing the world her behind. She didn't want a decent man, which is why she didn't get one. But then again, do we really want to take her at her word when it comes to the men she claims to have been involved with? I wonder if any of her exes were talked to, would they agree with her characterization of their relationship, or would they tell a different story? Again, this is a woman who had no problem at all making a good living, living the good life, and having sexual relationships with famous rich men only because she was considered to be attractive. So when she was young and had rich men lining up to check for her, and she's seen to be in all the rap videos, and whenever you went to the grocery store or the bookstore, as soon as you passed the magazine rack, you saw her rack or her rear end. She wasn't saying anything about reparations then. But then again, these thoughts never do. It's only after they pass 40 and the phone stops ringing and the rich dudes have moved on to younger women, that's when she suddenly starts saying this stuff. She puts herself in a trick bag, then blames everyone else for not getting her out. And it would be funny, except for the fact that she's actually trying to abuse the term reparations so she can try to make it apply to her own selfish interests. I know you guys get tired of me telling you how much I hate so-called entertainment and media, but I'm sorry. So many people are addicted to the stuff. We can't deny that fact or try to pretend like we're going to wish it away. The white media uses its monopoly to push these images at us and to legitimize people like this by giving them a platform and broadcasting their vapid idiocy to the world. And sure, it's a waste of time to listen to people like Melyssa Ford, but it's not a waste of time to challenge and debunk her, because if we don't, people like this have the stage to themselves, and we see what kind of ideas they're going to try to push at people. These are the puppets who the white media uses to derange the mentality of the youth, to get young people thinking that casual sex and transactional relationships are the only reason for human interaction, and it's all about getting drunk, getting blowed, and finding somebody to sleep with. That kind of thing may work for the casual psychopaths who run the white media, but it will destroy an entire group of people if they internalize it and try to live by these whorehouse rules. You cannot have an ordered and structured society if you arrange your society along the lines of a brothel. You know, there was a time when black people understood that principle, and we used to take a hard line on the issue.
Next, general deportment. First, the young ladies. They must prove that they are worthy and appreciative of the courtesies we are going to show them. Soon, boyfriends and marriage will concern you. No man likes a slut for long. Only the worst type will marry one. And the competition for men on the outside is rough.
This shows that even thoughts who are brainless can be dangerous to people if they're allowed to run around just spouting their gibberish. Yes, even a thought can be dangerous. If recent reports are anything to go by, Joy Taylor had her exit strategy set up. As soon as that phone stopped ringing, or whenever these white men that she worked for decided that they were going to screw her career, she was going to cash in on them. She was ready for it. Well, I've often said that bootlicking is a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan, but when it comes to being somebody's side piece of the corporation, it can come with a nice severance package. But that severance package is supposed to come from whatever white paymasters they were sitting there playing the fool for. Our racial justice claims should never be perverted or otherwise sullied by some used-up party girl who's trying to find a come-up in her older years. I've got two things to say in closing about Melyssa Ford. First, she has no husband and no children. I hope she keeps it that way. And secondly, she needs to keep the word reparations out of her mouth, because what's broken with her can't be repaired. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Ginger Vine, Chevalier Foster, Gwendolyn Langston, Lisa Taylor, and Naji95. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.